Hello, everyone, and welcome to this year's World MUN Day class given by myself. I'm Daniel Gindis, one of the co-founders of Wisemee, and with me is
David Miles. I'm also one of the co-founders of Wisemee, and we're gonna have
really convenient that we're both here right now.
yeah.
So what we're going to go over today is MUN Research. It's one of the basics. It's one of our most trafficked articles, and we want to give a bit of insight. Of course, if you want to see more than this video, you can check out the article and the other articles on our website.
Yeah, not only is it one of the most trafficked, but it's the core behind anything related to MUN. If you want to write your speech, if you want to write your position paper, if you don't do your research right, it's all based off that. So
I actually to add to that, one of my MUN friends used our research article as a guide when preparing for a job interview at Goldman Sachs, and got the position. So these research tips actually really help you prepare for something much more than MUN.
but we're not going to cover that today.
Yeah,
we'll leave that for later.
We're not talking about getting into consultancies or finance. We're talking about preparing to be a delegate at an MUN conference. So the first thing I think it's important to establish about MUN research is what we're actually trying to research, because research is very general. It's like, oh, let's research, but you need to know what you're researching for. You're not going to be able to find it. You won't know what you're looking for. So the first thing is for the goal of MUN research is to come up with a clash or what you want to do or your policy proposal. So we're researching to know what our country wants to do to solve the problem that we're talking about.
Yeah, but let's take it one further, Daniel. I'm just going to ask you a random question. What do most delegates usually do in the very beginning when you say go research something? Do you think they start with a clash?
Not at all. I think it's the sad part is that the gut reflex of a lot of research is just to research the problem and bring more facts about the problem. So instead of like solution-oriented thinking, you're just going to get a bigger description. There was an earthquake. Okay, we'll know more about what neighborhoods were hit, which people were, knocked underground, the death count, the wounded count, but nothing about solutions, about trucks, about tractors, none of that.
Yeah. So why do you think that this is already a good start? I know we're only on the first slide, but I want to take a moment here to really delve into why start with the clash. Why is it so different than what most delegates might just jump into the data?
I feel that it's natural for people to start reading about things without knowing what it is that they're looking for. I think that clearly defined papers in school or university, like people need to know the rules. They need to know the instructions. Otherwise, just making things up, speaking from the gut. And the difference between a beginner and a veteran MUNer is that you don't speak from the gut anymore. You say what the others need to hear, and it comes from an understanding of what you're trying to achieve, instead of just emotionally repeating something everybody knows. It's like, yeah, the people by the earthquake are in danger. Okay,
I love that you bring in emotion, because you think of the clash of the first touch of emotion. If all you're doing is talking about the raw data, then there is no connection to the emotion. Think of a clash of how is this going to emotionally impact one over the other, which I know, Daniel, you and I over the years have always talked and trained clash in a number of different ways. And one of the ways of looking at it is what's going to spark an emotional response of saying, I'm with them, I'm against them, I agree, I disagree. And that's where I guess we'll just want to start. So I'll hand it back to you.
So yeah, I think that when the best response you can get for your opening speech, by the way, if you want to hear more on opening speeches, I think that was the topic we did for last year's World MUN Day, and also in our article on how to write an opening speech. But the opening speech, the goal is, again, you don't repeat the problem at all. You say what you're going to do, you bring some facts, and then how you're going to do it. You basically lay out the clause you want to see in a resolution, and others will listen and go, oh, that person did research. They have some good ideas. These ideas could get a majority in the room. We feel this is someone worth working with or directly working against, because they're so clear they can be a counterpoint to my coalition. So both of those things work well. So moving back, the goal of your MUN research is to find the solution to the issue that you choose to define. Like more on that in the opening speech article, we just want to focus more on research today, but your goal is to find the solution that works for your country, and everything you're learning, both about your committee, your country, and the topic is there for you to understand and come up with a one line of what you want to do that is then broken down in multiple how steps. And that's basically the goal. Effective research can take a short amount of time. Research is made shorter by knowing what to look for. So if I know that I'm looking to understand the problem and I'm looking to solve it, that can save a bunch of time. And we really, really need that because the internet is very large. Once upon a time, before any of us were doing MUN, you had physical libraries. You were limited by the latest editions of the newspapers to show up. These days, if we're dealing, let's say, with pollution, Belgium ocean pollution, 14 million results, like good luck on that, navigating that. So for this reason, it's so important to have some kind of focus and know where you're going and to avoid the internet search rabbit hole.
The analogy I personally like using is thinking without having a target of what type of piece of information you're looking for. It's sort of like an archer shooting to a target in the fog. Even if they hit bullseye, smack in the middle, perfect shot, found exactly what they wanted in their research, they wouldn't know they even found it. They wouldn't know where to look. They just keep on gathering data, so knowing where you're going is really going to help you out. I agree 100%.
Just couldn't say it better myself. So moving on for MUN research, while there's so much more to research, we want to focus today on three things, the basic three parts: committee, country, and topic. If this is your first MUN, I would recommend doing it in this order: committee, country, topic. Don't take too much time on any one of them. 15-20 minutes can sometimes be enough. Definitely don't spend hours. Your goal is to come up with a clash, and then when you have what you want to do, then you can go back and but you want to get there as fast as possible and not get lost.
Yeah, I love analogies. If you didn't figure that one out yet, think of yourself as a goldfish. Goldfish actually grow as big as the environment around them, or so I'm told. I don't know. I didn't even actually Google that one, but it sounds really good. So it's the same thing with research. If you give yourself days or hours, that's how much it's going to take over, and that's why I always love the idea of starting off with 10-15-minute chunks and breaking it down to 3 segments. And then you'll have a much better idea of where you need to delve in more.
Exactly. So when it comes to committee, what we want to understand is mandate, what they're doing today, and the past, and precedent, which is things they've allowed themselves to do in the past. Precedent is a really important word in Model UN. Like, precedent means that if it was done before, it can be done again. So what to look for: mandate is what your committee says they do. Sometimes it can be vague. Sometimes this can be not updated. What they're doing today, what your committee is doing right now. And third are big things they did in the past. What precedents were set for your committee? Obviously, the closer it is to today, the more likely they're still following those exact guidelines. And the places to find these are also written here on the slide. The committee, check their website. Every UN committee has a website. There where they talk about what they do. They may not cover everything in the amount of detail that you would like, and that's why Wikipedia, the news, other publications are great for what they're doing now. For big past actions, a lot of different places. Wikipedia is good because there are links to sources below where you can find additional things to read. So when it comes to committee, though, you just need in the beginning to get a general idea of, okay, what did they do? What are they doing? You don't need to do this in super depth. You just need to get to an understanding of what they do so you can know what you can do as someone voting for the resources of that committee. That's your goal, to understand the resources and how you can work with them if you get majority vote. Nothing else. You're not writing a paper on the committee. You're not meant to be an expert at the World Health Organization or about the UN Office of Drugs and Crime or the High Commissioner of Refugees. You're not writing a master's thesis. You just need to know what they can actually do, because some committees can't do that much or do different things or different scope from what their namesake may say.
Yeah, I think, I have to reiterate that all over and nail it down even more is you do not need to be an expert about any one of those, and really get into the nitty gritty. Of course you could if you do have the time, but usually that's simply not necessary to be really good at MUN and to have covered that point where it's needed for the committee or the conference that you're going to.
Yeah, exactly. So once you have an idea of what they say they do, and that's only to see if there's a discrepancy between what they say they do and what they do. When you see what they do and maybe a bit of what they did, you're already good to move on to learning about your country. So this should not take 15 minutes. If you don't get a clear idea with 15 minutes of internet research, it's probably gonna take you a lot longer. Skip it. Also, by the way, your study guide may have it. It really depends. Some study guides also just repeat, like, this committee was founded in 1952, great. And its first president was whoever from some country. Many study guides and chairs don't take the time to really write in detail what the committee's powers are, what they're doing now. And if they don't, that's something you need to find. But some really good study guides do have it, and that can save you this entire section, or maybe you'll just do this to supplement what it is that you have. All right,
knowing the general idea is what's going to help you move forward. Knowing the nitty gritty, personally, I've never seen that win committees, by knowing every little nick and cranny, about the committee. But of course, knowing what you can't do,
Yeah, if you're the World Health Organization, you can't sanction a country and freeze bank accounts and assets. That's not possible. If you're the World Health Organization, you can't give extra food to a starving region. So it's kind of important to know that. All right, so let's move on to country. This is the big one in what I feel our article really brings in, saving us from drowning in endless amounts of information. When you learn about your country, there's a very big difference in learning about your country to know who you are and learning about your country in relation to the topic. And this is many delegates confuse. And will spend hours researching their country on things that aren't relevant. If we're a committee talking about the environment, you don't need to know about your military spending. You don't need to know about your education policies. And if you go endlessly learning about your country, all these things, you'll find yourself with a lot of irrelevant information, may be very interesting, but not helpful. So what we're teaching here are the 5 things you need to know about your country, which you should learn before you even research a topic, just to get an idea of where you stand in the global scale. And it's really, and you should be able to do this in a really short amount of time. The MUN Basic 5, or Orientation 180, which is what we call it in our article also, because it gives you a 180 perspective on a country you know nothing about, and it should also take you about 180 seconds. This is built to be really, really fast. So it's not that we just show you the category. We're now going to go through together, David and I, and explain what each of these things mean, as in not just find their wealth, what you're looking for and how to use that information.
Sounds great.
All right. So,
but it's going to take us over 180 seconds to teach it. But yeah, it should be.
It will take, probably. But hopefully, however long this takes will mean that you can do it in 100.
Yeah, please do not start a stopwatch, and see it. The idea.
Okay, if these guys didn't teach it in 180 seconds, why should I think I can do it in 180 seconds? But yeah. So MUN Research. These are the 5 categories, and let's see the conclusions that we want to get. So this is what you're going for when you're doing your research, and this is why it can be so fast. You don't need that much. Country size. You don't need the kilometers or the miles of how big it is. Just, is it big? Is it small? How much territory? It doesn't even matter how much of it is usable for farming, unless that's your topic. Like, oh, I'm a big country. I'm a very big country. Population, just the number of people. Neighbors, namely, am I actively at war or not? If you're tense, peaceful, very peaceful, it's about the same. Wealth, are you very rich, medium, poor? Politics, are you democracy? Are you a democracy or a not democracy? And democracy means that you have some signs of a democracy, but aren't one in practice. For example, you have elections, but the leader won't change either way. And if you're a democracy, right-wing party, left-wing party, or other. And this can help you guide all of many of your policies. Now, it's not that every country's parties, like a right wing or left party, is exactly the same. You may need to go specifically where they stand on certain issues. But at the same time, even though that is the case, it still guides you as far as what the leader's direction is. And you can see in the United States, Canada, Europe, that the change of a party from a left wing or to a right wing one can dramatically change their policies of them when they represent them in the UN, which is why that's important. All right, so let's talk about how you find all these things. Some of them are faster than others. Let's start with size. So how do you find a country's size? The answer is you look at Google Maps, you look at your country, and you go, okay, is it bigger or smaller? So Russia, so India over here is big. This is a big country. It's bigger than Yemen. It's bigger than Saudi Arabia, which is also pretty big. Egypt, I guess, would be a medium country compared to India. Greece would be a small country in relation. Russia is very, very, very big. It's not even on this map, but it's like all of this. And Israel is small. So that's our context.
Yeah, but again, this is for the Research 180. If you really want to learn about the size of the country, please Google that particular country and compare, because it's important for you to the general you, when you're looking at it, is understand how maps are created on perspective, because the world is round, and if you were to take a round ball and flatten it, that's one way of looking at it. And there are different ways of creating maps. So in Google Maps, I can't remember what strategy they use, but it doesn't mean if it to your eye looks smaller than another country, that it's really always the case. And this example, we're just taking ones that are extremely obvious also in reality, no matter what map you use.
Awesome. So exactly what David's saying, like there are ways to put this perspective, but basically open Google Maps, take a look at your country, say, all right, where does it stand? India is big, China is very big, Iran's pretty big, Egypt is medium, Romania is medium minus, and so on. Population, even faster than country. You Google the population of the country, you see the number. It's usually pretty recent here. We see that as of this taping, 2020 is the last census from Moldova, 2.6 million people. That's it. How many people you have in your country. This is something which you can also look in a comparison of populations to other countries, but it usually isn't so relevant as opposed to wealth, which is something we do want to see compared to others. So population, how many people do you have? Am I a very large country with very few people? Am I a large country with many people? We've already learned a bunch. Neighbors. So with neighbors and your relation to the neighbors, you want to look at a map. Let's say I'm Iran. Who are my neighbors? Turkey, Iraq, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Wow, a whole bunch of countries over here. I'm Egypt. Libya, Sudan, and Israel are my neighbors. And I have some water access. So this is it. That's how you see who's near you. If you don't know about a specific country's relation with this, refresher, Google if you're at war with that country. Most of the time you won't be. And then you're just business as usual. A cold relation doesn't mean a war. And if you are at war, then all your resources should be going towards that war. But most countries are not at war most of the time.
Most of the time, that's right. And then it's also important to know, just because you brought up Egypt, I know that Egypt in particular also has when it comes to scarce water resources, and I do know because of recent articles over the last few years that there are other neighboring countries that are threatening, that are planning on even building dams that would affect their water that gets streamed into them. So even though it's not, I wouldn't call it a war when when you think about war, they're taking out their guns and fighting or anything else that might be going on. But it could be also about different types of resources threatening those types of resources. And those are other things that you can delve into, but you don't need to do that in the 180, but other ideas that you might want to look into when you're doing your research and looking around.
Exactly. Just because you're not actively at war doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of tension. And if the topic is, like David said, water scarcity, because Egypt is sitting on the Nile, which 8 other countries are on the water that goes into the Nile, maybe that type of tension is relevant to your topic if it's about water scarcity. But it probably isn't if it's about classroom size reform. So there too, Dave makes a great point. You don't need to be actively at war for it to be a consideration, but that is topic dependent. And that's usually why if your country is actively at war, it will impact many things. Like we don't have time to rebuild the way we form our classrooms. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a bunch of tensions that can be there, which you can get to when you're researching the topic and your connection, not during the 180 though. So let's move on to wealth. Okay, so far we know if we're big and small, how many people, our neighbors, and the basics on the relations, like do we have a really extreme relationship with one or more of them? To find wealth, an easy and good measure to use is GDP, which means gross domestic product. GDP is the total value of goods and services produced by a country in a year. GDP, however, doesn't measure all wealth. For example, imports or some online services aren't factored in. So it's not the only measure. It's a pretty good and standardly used one. However, for certain topics, you may want to use alternative sources. We have a whole list of sources on our article of places to find things. Now with GDP, you want to add something, David?
What I was saying is it's an indicator in the very beginning, and there are whole big discussions about GDP and what should be included, what shouldn't, and how people countries calculate it, and so on and so forth. But it's a very good indicator to see the wealth of the country.
Exactly. So to find GDP, I would suggest finding the Wikipedia article for GDP nominal. Nominal is for the country. Per capita is the average wealth of individual people, and that's a quality of life measure. So just find GDP nominal on Wikipedia and find your country on the list. Let's say I am India. So India is the 6th wealthiest country in the world by GDP. However, I already know that I'm a large country with a large population. So as a country, we have a lot of money coming in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our quality of life is better than Canada, which is a few countries lower, but has many less people. But the main idea is looking for where you are and who is in your wealth bracket. Look at who is above and below where you are in the wealth bracket. So here we have the wealthiest countries in the world, but when you go down, you get an idea of where you stand, just looking at this list rather than Googling a number. Because we're able to understand for a population size, 2 million, 20 million, like that we can understand, but all these numbers of the amount of money and 22,939,580 what, like that's so astronomical that to my mind the comparison and being able to see who's around really helps in the understanding.
Yeah. So again, what Daniel's talking about, I think what we're looking at over there was GDP per country, and not the GDP, per capita, per person. To actually do the calculation, and there are many different resources online to find out how much on what's really going on in that country.
Exactly. So wealth is oftentimes the most important of the indicators. It impacts a lot of topics, so it's worth taking time to see what your wealth is and how that, what other countries are in the same region of discussion. If it is very specific, you may need to do additional research, but to get an idea of where you stand, this is enough for the 180. Finally, politics. So with politics, we want to know who is running the country. And if it's a democratic country, we also want to know the political leanings of their party. So to find countries that aren't democratic, you can usually Google them pretty quickly. You can find out if they are monarchies, if their leader hasn't changed in 30 years. So to find the non-democracies or the democratic countries, are usually easier. If they started ruling in 1994 and they're still in power today, it's probably not a democracy. At the same time, what do we do when it is a democracy? How do we find out, first of all, like we can find the leader's name. Sometimes, if there's a president and a prime minister, you need to find which one of them is actually the, important one running the country. It can change. In Europe, there are more prime ministers. In the United States, it's a president, depending on the system. But what's important is when we find this leader, we need to know where their political party stands. And much of the time, unless it is one of the most, like the more famous countries, like we'll usually know which political party is running the United States, but that's usually where it ends. Maybe, who's running the UK or France or Germany, but for most countries, we have no idea. So how do we find out, first of all, what the political party is, and then the political leanings of the party? Miles, you want to add something?
I got nothing to add. This is all you, Daniel.
Amazing. Okay.
I've got no analogies here.
Okay. So the way you do it is, first of all, you find the head of state of your country. Find the person. If you look for the office, you're going to get a page describing the office. That's not going to help you find what political ideology is guiding the country. So here, let's take Canada. Find the name of, so first we found the leader of Canada. The prime minister is Justin Trudeau. Okay, once you find the leader, not the office, because if you find the page of the prime minister of Canada, that's just going to describe the office. We find his political party, the Liberal Party. Sounds easy, it's not. And I will tell you why. Because political parties aren't necessarily named for what it is they do. And there are many examples of that. For example, the Democratic People's Republic of Congo is not a particularly democratic peoplesy or republic-y country. So these names can be misleading. You can find parties calling themselves national socialist parties that are not socialist in any way. So this is why it's very important for us to find names, like find what these names mean. So when you find the leader, you find their party. And after you find their party, you research the party and then see if it writes where the leaning is. So for example, here, the Liberal Party of Canada, we can see here, it says they're a center-left party. And their ideology is liberalism and social liberalism, and their political affiliation is center-left. So here we have an answer. The Liberal Party of Canada is indeed a left-leaning party. But that doesn't mean that every Liberal Party is left-leaning. It doesn't mean that every, People's Party goes one way or the other. So within this is a quick way to find the political position of the party in power. You find the leader, you find their party, and you find what their party is or does.
Yeah, the big thing I think that we're saying here is just don't make assumptions. Back it up. That's why we're doing the research. If you just wanted to make assumptions, you could look at it and say, oh, I assume that this is exactly how big the country is, or these are the leaders, or this and that, go find the data to back it up and then build your case around it. Again, we're only talking about research here. So this is the research part, and this is where you're finding it all to back it up. This is the foundation behind it all.
Yeah, exactly. So to review, MUN Country Research took us more than 3 minutes to describe it, but hopefully you'll be able to find it much faster. Country size. Very big, big, medium, small, very small. Population, just the number. Neighbors, if you're not sure, Google if you're actively at war. Wealth, look at yourself on the scale. Politics, democracy, democracy, not democracy. And if democracy, left, right, or other. And you see, usually you can do this in 5 minutes. Get a basic idea. Oh, this is the type of country that I am. Vanuatu, now I know where I stand. Moldova, now I know where I stand. United States, now I know where I stand. All right, so this moves us on to the final section, which is the topic. We've done committee, we've done country. Let's talk about topic, the issue of the day. So the topic research goal that we want to find is, first of all, our country's connection to the topic, and if we have any, and then if there's a positive or negative relationship. Pollution, do we have more of it or less of it? Aging population, is that an issue that we have? You want to see a relationship. It's not enough to see where things are today. You want to be able to identify a trend. Compare, let's say, last year and this year and see, is it going up? Is it going down? What is going on? This is something which is very important to understand. It's not facts in a vacuum. We're trying to reach conclusions in the topic. Are things getting better or worse for us, for the globe, for whatever it is that we're looking at? And then the steps of topic research is first and foremost to read the study guide. Then you can read.
Wait.
Yeah.
I got to stop you there for a moment.
Yeah.
How many delegates do you think don't read the study guide? Because you say read the study guide and you're passing through it, but come on. How many times have we seen the delegates show up and they're like, oh, there was a study guide?
I've had that more than enough times. I think there was one time there was there was a chair like sent a delegate out, like, go read the study guide, come back in half an hour. So,
yeah, I have to say, it's happened to me, it's happened to you, it's happened to so many of us that we had to print out the study guide for them, kind of hand it out, or say, okay, we're going to spend the next 20 minutes so you can read the study guide. Please, if you're going to be going to a conference, if you're going to be going to anything, even a training, read the study guide. That's 101.
Definitely. So we'll say first thing we recommend, if you weren't planning on reading the study guide, please read the study guide. We think it's a good place. Even if it's a bad study guide, you'll have the same starting point that all the other delegates do. And then you'll have all the more reason to, research and follow the that we.
We're not going to get into advanced tactics, but we do have an article about what happens if you really have a bad study guide, and what really happens over there. But you can read about that in our specialty guide online.
What to do with study guides.
Yeah.
Classic. Which was inspired by so many times as delegates where we would go and there'd be like the history of the committee is, basically covered from the year of its creation for the first year. There's nothing about their mandate. The topic is so general, we've definitely had those, but there are many great study guides out there. I would say that from so many conferences, the guides are excellent. They're comprehensive. So a great starting and research tool. So like sometimes they're bad ones and you deal with that, but a lot of the time they're good. First thing, read the study guide. The thing is, the study guide's a one size fits all. It's not about your country and your relation. And this is why you need to research additional topic specific data about your country's relation to the topic. And this ties into the trends and what I said before. You want to establish if your connection to the topic is a positive one or a negative one and how it stands. You find your trends. You say, oh, our pollution is increasing. Our pollution is decreasing. We're using more or less oil. The conflict we're in is getting, better or worse. Less people are, getting injured. And then you understand your interests within it all. Because if your connection to it is something which impacts you, you have a lack of clean water, you want to get more clean water. You now need a solution that will have this committee improve clean water access, ideally and hopefully specifically for you. And that's the goal. Once you understand the topic, you can decide what problem within it you want to solve. And your solution is what you want to do. And that is the clash. So you start with your committee, what they can do, your country, who you are, and then the topic, what you're talking about. And all of that to say, okay, this is the problem I feel we're focusing on. How do I solve that? That is my clash. And that is the first line of your opening speech. Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, Moldova feels that to continue access to clean water, we need to give large cities desalination ability so they can purify their own water sources if they're near your oceans. Something like that. So
sounds great.
So that's a wrap up of our research guide. I want to thank everyone for joining us this wonderful World MUN Day. I want to thank the organizers, and Wisemee is very happy to be a partner of what we think this excellent celebration of Model UN is.
Oh yeah, I know it's changed our lives. And hopefully, like you said, kind of to go full circle, the research that we talk about is not just about MUN. If you know what you're looking for and you have the appropriate skill set, then you can adapt it to so many other things in your life.
Wonderful. So without further ado, we're going to wish everyone a happy World MUN Day. Hope you enjoyed our little research video. You can find more articles on our website. And if you have any questions at all, you can write to David. He'll be happy to answer them for you.
Yeah, sounds great. Happy
Happy World MUN Day, and see y'all next year or sooner.